Derek Valentine adjusted the knot of his brioni tie, the silk a deep shade of oxblood that perfectly complemented his custom-tailored suit. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, a modern-day king surveying his kingdom. Below him, the manicured lawns and historic stone buildings of Greenwich, Connecticut, spread out like a pristine tapestry woven with old money and new ambition. At 43, Derek was more than just a successful businessman. He was a symbol. In a town where black faces were more commonly seen serving cocktails at the country club than sitting on corporate boards, Derek Valentine hadn't just gotten a seat at the table. He'd built the damn table himself. Valentine Consulting was his empire, a testament to a mind so sharp it could cut diamonds and a work ethic forged in the fires of knowing he always had to be twice as good to get half as much. His public life was a masterclass in perfection. His wife, Nala, a woman of breathtaking elegance and philanthropic grace, was the perfect partner. Their 2 children, 10-year-old Ela and 7-year-old Tyrone, were bright, beautiful, and attended the most exclusive private school in the state. Their home, a stunning architectural marvel of glass and steel nestled in the private enclave of Belle Haven, was frequently featured in design magazines. It was a glass castle, a transparent display of success, taste, and unimpeachable family values. But Derek knew, with a certainty that chilled his bones, that glass shatters. The afternoon board meeting had been another victory. The numbers were flawless, the projections were aggressive, and the board, a collection of pale, aging white men who had initially viewed him with skepticism, now looked at him with a mixture of awe and reliance. A 22% quarterly growth, Derek announced, his voice smooth and steady, betraying none of the fractures in his soul. We're not just leading the market, we're redefining it. They applauded, their faces reflecting his own polished image back at him. They saw the icon, the brilliant strategist, the black man who had transcended race to become one of them. They had no idea what he did when the sun went down. Later, as the evening bled from gold to violet across the Long Island Sound, Derek lingered in his office. The silence was a welcome reprieve. He walked over to his mahogany desk, unlocked a discreet drawer, and pulled out a burner phone, a sleek, anonymous black slab that held his other life. He powered it on, and the screen lit up with a single, unread message. It was from a contact saved simply as, "Oh. The cage is getting smaller. I need to fly." A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through him. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in the cage of his own making. He knew what the message meant. It was a poetic ultimatum, the kind she was so fond of. Olivia. Her name was a whisper of danger and desire. He quickly typed a reply, his thumbs slick with a sudden sweat. "Patience, my love. Almost there. Our place tonight. 9 p.m. He sent the message and immediately deleted the thread, a practiced, reflexive action. He slipped the phone back into its hiding place and took a deep breath, forcing the mask of Derek Valentine, Greenwich Titan, back into place. But the carefully constructed walls of his world felt thinner than ever. As he drove his black Lexus down the winding, tree-lined roads toward home, the opulent mansions on either side seemed to mock him. They were fortresses of legacy and tradition, built on foundations of secrets far older but no less destructive than his own. He arrived home to the sound of laughter. Nala was in the garden with the kids, her silhouette framed by the setting sun. "Daddy!" Tyrone yelled, a streak of pure joy as he ran across the perfectly manicured lawn and leaped into Derek's arms. Illa followed, more composed but with a smile that lit up her face. This was the life he had built, the life he was so terrified of losing. This was real. This was his truth. Or was it? Over a dinner of seared scallops and risotto, Nala discussed the upcoming hospital charity gala she was chairing. "Thurston Reed called again," she said, naming the town's de facto patriarch. "He was so impressed with your profile in the Times. Said you're a credit to the community." Derek smiled, a hollow gesture. "That's good to hear." He felt a prickle of unease at the mention of the Times. It was Olivia's paper. She'd been the one who interviewed him for that profile 6 months ago. That was how it all started. Later that night, after tucking the children into bed and kissing Nala goodnight with a lie on his lips about a late-night conference call with the London office, he slipped out into the darkness. The drive to the other side of town was a journey across worlds. He left the quiet, sprawling estates of Greenwich and crossed into Stamford, where the buildings were closer together and the air hummed with a different, more urgent energy. He pulled up to an anonymous-looking apartment complex, a world away from his glass castle. He let himself into her fifth-floor apartment with his own key. The air inside was thick with the scent of sandalwood and old books. And there she was, Olivia Tempo. She was standing by the window, bathed in the eclectic glow of the city lights, a glass of red wine in her hand. She turned, and his breath caught in his chest. At 29, with her sharp, intelligent eyes, a confident smile, and a cascade of purple-dyed braids, she was a force of nature. She was the most alive person he had ever known. "You're late," she said, her voice a low, melodic hum. "London called," he lied, the words tasting like ash. She took a slow sip of her wine, her eyes never leaving his. They held a deep, knowing sadness that cut through his defenses. "The cage, Derek," she said softly, walking towards him. "I can't live in it anymore, and I'm starting to think you're the one who locked the door." He reached for her, but for the first time, she took a small step back. The air crackled with unspoken words, with the terrifying possibility that the choice he had been running from for 2 years had finally caught up to him. His two worlds, so carefully separated, were on a collision course, and he was standing right at the point of impact. The beginning had been intoxicating, a spark in the sterile, predictable landscape of his life. 6 months ago, Olivia Tempo had walked into his office to interview him for a feature in the Stamford Times titled "The New Face of Greenwich." He had expected another fawning journalist, eager to print the carefully curated narrative his PR team had crafted. He was not prepared for her. She didn't ask about his quarterly earnings or his philanthropic endeavors. Instead, she asked, "Mr. Valentine, what does it feel like to be the acceptable black man in a town that still has segregated country clubs?" The question was a grenade, tossed casually onto the polished surface of his life. It was audacious, insightful, and utterly disarming. For the first time in years, Derek felt seen, not as the symbol, but as the man. He found himself telling her things he'd never even admitted to Marcus, his best friend and business partner. The subtle sting of microaggressions, the crushing weight of representation, the constant, exhausting performance of being palatable to white power structures. She listened, her gaze intense and empathetic. She understood. After the interview, he'd found an excuse to call her. That call turned into a coffee, which turned into a clandestine dinner in a dimly lit corner of a restaurant miles away in New Haven. It was there, over a bottle of expensive Cabernet, that she told him her story. She told him about her transition, about the brutal journey of aligning her body with her soul. She spoke of the family that disowned her, the friends she lost, and the unshakable resolve she found within herself to live authentically. Derek was captivated. Her courage was a beacon. In a world where he felt compelled to hide so much of himself to fit in, Olivia had fought tooth and nail just to be herself. Her being transgender wasn't a complication. To him, it was a testament to her strength. It made her even more beautiful. Their affair became his sanctuary. Her small, vibrant Stamford apartment was the only place he could take off the armor. It was filled with her personality, stacks of books on social justice, framed photos of protests, a half-finished painting on an easel. It was messy, passionate, and real, a stark contrast to the minimalist, museum-like perfection of his Greenwich home. With Olivia, he wasn't the CEO or the perfect husband. He was just Derek, a man who could laugh freely, debate politics with fiery passion, and feel a connection that transcended the carefully drawn lines of his life. But sanctuaries built on lies have weak foundations. As months turned into a year, then 2, the beautiful escape began to feel like a trap. For Derek, their secrecy was a necessary shield. For Olivia, it was a constant, painful invalidation of her identity and their love. "I spent the first 20 years of my life hiding who I was," she told him one night, her voice raw with emotion. "I fought, I bled, I lost almost everything to stop hiding. I won't do it again, Derek, not even for you." The arguments became more frequent, whispered and desperate in the confines of her apartment. He'd make promises. "Just give me more time." The kids are too young. I need to close this merger first. And he almost believed them himself. But Olivia saw them for what they were, justifications born of fear. The pressure mounted from another direction. Olivia wasn't just a passionate soul, she was a damn good journalist. Her latest project was an investigative piece on a series of suspicious land deals in the historically black neighborhood of Shippen Point in Stamford. A powerful development firm, Northgate Holdings, was buying up properties at low rates from elderly residents, leveraging zoning loopholes to pave the way for a luxury waterfront development. The story smelled of gentrification, exploitation, and political corruption. And Derek knew Northgate Holdings. They were one of Valentine Consulting's most lucrative clients. The firm was run by old money Greenwich families, men he played golf with, men whose quiet racism was an unspoken currency of their world. They would never overtly say anything, but Derek knew how they saw the world. They saw people like the residents of Shippen Point as obstacles to progress, and people like Olivia as an aberration. One evening, Olivia had spread her research across the floor of her apartment. Maps, property deeds, shell company diagrams. "I think I've got them, Derek," she'd said, her eyes blazing with journalistic fervor. "There's a link to a city councilman. This is big." A cold dread washed over him. "Be careful, O," he warned, his voice tighter than he intended. "These are not people you want to mess with." "Courage, remember?" she replied, tapping a keychain he'd given her, engraved with a feather. "It's what you said you loved about me." But her courage was now a direct threat to his carefully balanced world. If her story broke and connected back to his clients, the blowback would be immense. The men from Northgate wouldn't hesitate to cut him loose, to remind him of his place. The scandal would be amplified tenfold by the revelation of their affair. He could see the headlines. Greenwich tycoon's secret life with transgender reporter unravels shady land deal. It was a perfect storm of sex, race, gender, and money. It would be more than a scandal. It would be his annihilation. Now, standing in her apartment after receiving her cryptic text, he could see the impatience etched on her face. "I'm closing in on the Northgate story," she said, her tone businesslike, a clear departure from their usual intimacy. "I have a source meeting tomorrow who is ready to confirm the councilman's involvement. After that, I'm publishing. And after that," she paused, her gaze locking with his, "I'm done being a secret. You have until the story drops to decide. Derek, are you with me, out in the open? Or are you a part of the world I'm about to expose?" The forbidden flame that had once been his comfort had grown into a wildfire, and it was threatening to burn his entire world to the ground. The weight of Olivia's ultimatum pressed down on Derek like the physical force of gravity. He felt it in the boardroom, a dull ache behind his eyes as he presented flawless data. He felt it at the dinner table, a tightness in his chest as his daughter Illa recounted her day at the science fair. Every smile he gave his family, every confident directive he gave his team, felt like a betrayal. He was living on a fault line, and the ground beneath his feet was beginning to tremble. He needed to talk to someone who understood the stratosphere he operated in, the delicate dance of race and power in a place like Greenwich. He called Marcus Ebenezer, his best friend since their days at Wharton, and the stoic COO of Valentine Consulting. They met at their usual spot, a secluded corner of a high-end whiskey bar so exclusive it didn't have a sign. The amber liquid swirled in Derek's glass as he laid it all out. The 2-year affair, Olivia's identity, her strength, his love for her, and now her ultimatum, tangled with the explosive Northgate investigation. Marcus listened without interruption, his face a mask of thoughtful concern. When Derek finished, Marcus let out a long, slow breath. "A rock in a hard place doesn't even begin to cover it, man," Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. "This isn't just about you cheating on Nala. This is different." "Tell me about it," Derek said, his voice laced with bitter irony. "Do you have any idea what Thurston Reed and his cronies at the club would do if this came out? They tolerate me, Marcus. They see me as the exception, the good one, a black man who plays by their rules. This," he trailed off, shaking his head, "this shatters that illusion. An affair with a black transgender woman? A reporter who's about to incinerate one of their biggest cash cows? They wouldn't just drop me. They'd make an example of me. They'd remind everyone what happens when you forget your place." Marcus leaned forward, his expression grim. "The racism is a given, Derek. It's always been the air we breathe in these circles. But you've always been smarter than them. You've always been 10 steps ahead. How do you get ahead of this? Derek shot back, his composure cracking. I come clean to Nala. My marriage is over. My kids. God, my kids will be torn apart. The divorce will be a public bloodbath. Valentine Consulting will be toxic overnight. Our clients, the very men Olivia is investigating, will flee like we're the plague. Everything we've built for 20 years, gone. And the alternative? Marcus asked quietly. You lose Olivia. You keep living this lie, knowing you broke the one person who truly saw you. Can you live with that? Derek stared into his whiskey, the distorted reflection of his face a stranger's. He loved Olivia with a depth that terrified him. She was his truth. But Nayla and the kids were his life, his legacy. The horror was that he wanted both, and the universe was telling him he could have neither. The conversation ended without a solution, leaving Derek more isolated than ever. He was trapped between the life he was supposed to want and the woman he actually did. The next morning, the universe made its own move. As he was buttoning his shirt, preparing for another day of pretending, Nala's phone rang. He watched her face shift from serene morning calm to a mask of concerned surprise. What is it? He asked, adjusting his tie. That was the school, she said, hanging up. A major pipe burst overnight. The whole lower level is flooded. They're canceling classes for the day. The kids are home. Derek froze. His blood ran cold. Today. He had promised Olivia they would spend the day together. It was her day off, a rare chance for more than just a few stolen hours at night. He had promised they would talk, really talk, away from the city. A final plea for more time before her story dropped. He had a whole day of lies planned, a fabricated off-site strategy session that had just been vaporized. I have to call the office, he said, his mind racing as he reached for his work phone. Nayla smiled, oblivious to the panic surging through him. Why don't you take the day off, honey? It feels like fate. We never get a spontaneous family day. The kids would be ecstatic. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch a brand of guilt. We miss you, Derek. It feels like you're a ghost in this house lately. Her words were a gut punch of truth. He looked past her, through the massive glass windows of their home, and saw Tyrone chasing a butterfly on the lawn. He saw Illa reading on the porch swing. This was his family. This was his responsibility. In that moment, the choice seemed brutally clear. He couldn't burn this down. He just couldn't. You're right, he said, the words feeling like a betrayal to another part of his soul. He put his work phone away. A family day. It's exactly what we need. But as he smiled at his wife, his other hand was already in his pocket, clutching the burner phone. He needed to warn Olivia, to cancel, to lie one more time. He slipped into his study, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm of deceit. He typed out a quick message. Something came up. Family emergency. Can't meet today. I'm so sorry. I'll explain later. He hit send. A small red exclamation mark appeared next to the message. Message not delivered. He tried again. Same result. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. Her phone must be off, or maybe the network was down. He had no other way to reach her. He was scheduled to meet her at a secluded park in less than an hour. She would go there, wait for him, and when he didn't show up, what would she think? After her ultimatum, she would see this as his answer, as a coward's choice. And he knew Olivia. She was not one to be ignored. The cracks in his perfect world were widening into a chasm, and he had a terrifying feeling that he was about to be pulled in. Olivia Tempo checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, dabbing a touch of crimson lipstick onto her lips. She wasn't one for excessive makeup, but today felt different. It felt like a day for armor, for war paint. Her phone lay dead on the passenger seat. It had died sometime in the night, and in her agitated state of mind, she'd forgotten to charge it. She didn't know Derek had tried to cancel. As far as she was concerned, their meeting at the park was still on, a final summit to decide the future. But waiting for him felt too passive, too much like the role she had been playing for 2 long years. An impulse, sharp and decisive, took hold of her. No more meeting on his terms, in secret, tucked away in the shadows. Today she would bring the shadow to him. She started the car, but instead of heading to the park, she turned toward the Merritt Parkway, toward Greenwich. She knew the address. She'd looked it up once, a long time ago, in a moment of weakness and curiosity. She'd never gone, respecting the one fragile boundary they had. But today, boundaries felt like just another word for a cage. The drive into Bellhaven was like entering another country. The air grew stiller, the trees taller, the houses swelling into palatial estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. It was a world of quiet, immense power, designed to keep people like her out. She felt like an invader, her brightly colored Toyota a stark anomaly among the sleek black and silver German sedans that whispered along the pristine asphalt. It was the world Derek was so desperate to protect, the world he was choosing over her. Seeing it, feeling its oppressive perfection, only hardened her resolve. She parked her car a few houses down the street from his address, the engine ticking quietly as it cooled, and then she saw it. The glass castle. It was even more stunning and intimidating in person. Through the massive uncurtained windows, she could see a scene of domestic bliss that felt like a punch to the gut. There was Derek, dressed in casual clothes, laughing as he knelt on the floor, playing a board game with his son. A beautiful woman, Nayla, sat on a nearby sofa, watching them with a gentle smile. His daughter was curled up next to her, reading a book. It was perfect. A perfect family in a perfect house in a perfect town. And it was all a lie. Olivia felt the air leave her lungs, replaced by a cold, searing anger. 2 years of stolen moments, of whispered promises, of believing she was more than just a dirty little secret. And for what? For this meticulously crafted illusion. The keychain in her pocket felt heavy. Its engraved message, being yourself, is the ultimate courage. A bitter mockery. She got out of the car. Her movements were slow, deliberate. This was it. No more waiting. No more hiding. She wouldn't storm the front door. That was too crude. She was a journalist. Her weapon was the truth. She pulled out the small, disposable pay-as-you-go phone she kept in her glove box for contacting sensitive sources. She dialed his number, his real number, the one tied to his perfect life. Inside the house, Derek's pocket vibrated. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He usually ignored those, but a primal instinct told him this was different. Excusing himself with a murmur about a work text, he stepped toward the back of the house, toward the glass doors that led out to the sprawling, multi-tiered garden. He answered, his voice a low, cautious, "Hello?" "It's a beautiful home, Derek," Olivia's voice said, calm and clear as a bell. "Your family looks very happy." His blood turned to ice. He whipped his head around, scanning the street, the trees, everywhere. And then he saw her, standing on the sidewalk like an avenging angel, her purple braids a vibrant slash of defiance against the muted greens and grays of his neighborhood. She was holding the phone to her ear, looking directly at him. "Olivia, what the hell are you doing?" He hissed into the phone, his body rigid with panic. "You need to leave, now." "I don't think so," she replied, her voice unwavering. "We need to talk. I'm tired of meeting in parks and dingy apartments. Let's talk here. Or maybe," she paused, letting the threat hang in the air, "I should just come in and introduce myself to Nala." "Don't you dare," he whispered, his mind reeling. "Then come out here, the garden. Your backyard is huge. I'm sure no one will see us." She wasn't asking. She was telling him. She started walking, not toward the front door, but along the side of the property, toward the low stone wall that separated his manicured paradise from the outside world. He had no choice. "Stay there. I'm coming." He hung up, his hands trembling. He turned back to his family. "Just need to check the sprinkler system," he said, the lie clumsy and thin. "Something's wrong with the pressure." He slid open the glass door and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. His heart was a jackhammer in his chest. He walked quickly down the stone steps, past the pristine swimming pool and the meticulously pruned rose bushes, toward the secluded lower terrace. Olivia was already there, having easily hopped the low wall. She stood waiting for him, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "This is insane," he said, keeping his voice low. "You're going to destroy everything." "You already did that," she countered, her voice tight with pain. "You destroyed us with your cowardice. I'm just holding up a mirror so you can finally see the wreckage." She took a step closer, her eyes flashing. "And it's not just us I'm talking about, is it? I had my meeting this morning. My source came through. I know about Northgate's connection to the city council. And I know your firm helps them hide their money. It's all connected, Derek. Your perfect life is built on some very ugly secrets. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. She had him. She had everything. Olivia, please, he begged, the words feeling useless. We can fix this. Just give me... Daddy! The small voice cut through the tension like a knife. They both froze. Tyrone stood at the top of the stone steps, holding a glass of lemonade, his small face etched with confusion. Mommy said you were thirsty. He was looking right at them, at his father and the strange, beautiful woman with the purple hair. The gathering storm had just broken, and Derek was standing in the heart of the hurricane, with his 7-year-old son watching. Time seemed to warp, stretching and thinning into a high-pitched whine in Derek's ears. Tyrone stood on the top step, a small, innocent witness to the demolition of his father's world. His son's gaze flickered from Derek's panicked face to Olivia's resolute one. In that split second, Derek saw the future unfurl before him. The questions, the tears, Nala's arrival, the screaming match on the pristine lawn, the inevitable implosion of his family, his reputation, his entire existence. Everything he had clawed and bled for, the entire edifice of his life, was about to be brought down by a 7-year-old holding a glass of lemonade. "Who's that, Daddy?" Tyrone asked, his voice ringing with childish curiosity. Olivia didn't flinch. She held Derek's gaze, her expression a mixture of sorrow and steel. This was it. The moment of truth she had demanded. She took a small, deliberate step forward, as if to introduce herself. It was that step that broke him. A primal reptilian part of his brain took over, bypassing all logic, all morality. It was pure, instinctual survival. Stop her. Make it stop. The thought wasn't even fully formed. It was a surge of raw, animalistic panic. "Get back in the house, Tyrone!" he yelled, his voice a harsh, unrecognizable crack. The force of his own shout startled him. Tyrone's eyes widened in fear, and the glass of lemonade slipped from his small hand, shattering on the stone patio, with a sharp, crystalline crash. At the same instant, Derek moved. He lunged towards Olivia, not to strike her, but to push her back, to move her out of Tyrone's line of sight, to shove the problem back into the shadows. "Olivia, no!" he grunted, his hands making contact with her shoulders. He had misjudged his own strength, fueled by adrenaline and terror. He had also misjudged the landscape. The push was harder than he intended. Olivia, caught off guard, stumbled backward. Her heel caught on the edge of a decorative flagstone. She flailed, her arms windmilling for a balance that wasn't there. And directly behind her stood a heavy abstract stone sculpture Nala had purchased at a gallery auction. A jagged modernist piece meant to evoke the struggle of nature against civilization. There was a sickening, hollow thud. It was a sound so final, so absolute, it seemed to suck all the other noise from the world. Olivia's body went limp. She collapsed at the base of the sculpture, her head hitting the stone at an unnatural angle. One of the sharp, abstract edges of the artwork was now dark and wet. For a moment, Derek just stared, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. The world was utterly silent, save for the frantic pounding of his own heart. A thin, dark line of red began to snake its way from beneath Olivia's purple braids, a stark, obscene river against the pale gray of the stone. "Daddy, you hurt her," Tyrone whispered from the steps, his voice trembling. The whisper snapped Derek out of his paralysis. He rushed to Olivia's side, dropping to his knees. "Olivia, oh, wake up," he pleaded, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch. He gently turned her head. Her eyes were open, but they were vacant, staring up at the indifferent blue sky. There was no breath, no flicker of life, nothing. She was gone. The realization hit him not with a wave of grief, but with a tidal wave of ice-cold terror. What have I done? His mind, the same sharp analytical tool that built a corporate empire, began to work with a terrifying, detached clarity. Witness, his son, evidence, the body, the blood on the statue, motive, the affair, the Northgate investigation. He was ruined, prison, scandal. His children would know their father was a killer. The Thurston Reeds of the world would feast on his downfall, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties for decades. Tyrone, Derek said, his voice eerily calm. He did not turn to look at his son. He kept his back to him, shielding the horrific scene. Go inside right now. Tell Mommy that I dropped something heavy and made a loud noise. Tell her I'm cleaning up a little mess. Do not tell her you saw the lady. Do you understand me? This is a grown-up secret, a game. Can you do that for me? He heard the boy's hesitant footsteps retreating, then the slide and click of the glass door closing. He was alone. Alone with the body of the woman he loved, the woman he had just killed. The grief he should have felt was suffocated by a more powerful, all-consuming instinct, self-preservation. Panic gave way to a chillingly rational plan. A fall? An accident? No. The police would ask questions. Why was she here? They would find the connection between them. It was too risky. He had to make her disappear, not just her body, but her presence here. She was never in his garden. She was never at his house. The confrontation, the argument, the fall, none of it ever happened. He looked down at his hands, then at the still form on the ground. The loving father, the respected businessman, the community icon, that man died with her. In his place stood something new, something cold and calculating, a survivor. He began to think, not about morality or love, but about logistics, the car, the time of day, the location. He had to erase her. He had to erase what he had done. And as he began the grim task of covering his tracks, a single horrifying thought echoed in the silent garden. She was never here. The sun began its descent, casting long, accusatory shadows across the garden. For Derek, the world had shrunk to this single, horrifying task. Every instinct, every ounce of his formidable intelligence was now focused on the grim logistics of erasure. He worked with a speed and precision that belied the chaos raging inside him. First, the immediate scene. He grabbed a garden hose with a high-pressure nozzle and ruthlessly sprayed down the stone sculpture and the surrounding flagstones. He watched as Olivia's blood, diluted and pinkish, swirled into the rich soil of Nala's flower beds. He knew it wasn't perfect, that forensic science was a marvel of detection, but it was a start. He needed to muddy the waters, to create doubt. Next, Tyrone. He went inside, his face a carefully constructed mask of normalcy. Nala was in the kitchen, comforting a still-shaken Tyrone. "He said you made a loud bang," she said, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you okay?" "Fine," Derek said, his voice impossibly steady. "I tripped carrying a heavy bag of fertilizer. Made a mess, that's all. I'm going to run to the garden center before it closes to get a replacement." It was a plausible lie, a perfect excuse to be gone for a few hours. He kissed Nayla and ruffled Tyrone's hair, a gesture that felt grotesque and alien. "Be a good boy for Mommy," he said, the words catching in his throat. His mind was a checklist: car, body, location, alibi. He went to the garage and retrieved a heavy-duty tarp he used for yard work. Returning to the garden under the deepening twilight, he performed the most gruesome act of his life. He wrapped Olivia's lifeless body in the tarp, his movements stiff and mechanical. He tried not to look at her face. He focused on the task, treating her body as cargo, a problem to be relocated. He was shockingly strong, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He hoisted the heavy bundle over his shoulder and carried it, sticking to the shadows along the side of the house, to where her car was parked down the street. The street was quiet. The residents of Belhaven were at dinner or inside their fortresses. With trembling hands, he fumbled through her purse, which she had dropped during the fall, for her keys. He found them, popped the trunk of her Toyota, and placed her body inside. He then drove her car, a brazen act of desperation, away from his pristine neighborhood. He drove his own Lexus behind it, a two-car funeral procession into the night. He needed a location, not just a place to dump her, but a place that told a story, a false narrative. And in a society steeped in racial and class prejudice, he knew exactly what kind of story the police would be quick to believe. He drove south, away from the manicured safety of Greenwich, toward the industrial underbelly of Stamford. He found what he was looking for in a desolate area near the train tracks, a forgotten weed-choked street lined with abandoned warehouses and graffiti-scarred walls. It was the kind of place the evening news reported on, with grim statistics. He pulled her car into a secluded spot behind a crumbling brick building. Now for the staging. He moved her from the trunk to the driver's seat, positioning her to look like she had been attacked while in her car. A robbery gone wrong? A drug deal gone bad? He opened her purse and scattered a few items on the passenger seat, but left the wallet with her cash and cards. A panicked killer, scared off before they could finish the job. It was messy, but messiness fit the narrative he was creating. A narrative about urban violence, about the dangers of certain neighborhoods. A narrative that would point 1,000 miles away from a respected businessman in Greenwich. Then he remembered the gun. Months ago, after a string of burglaries in a neighboring town, he had bought a handgun for protection. It was a .45 caliber, kept in a locked box in his study. He'd never even fired it, but now it was a liability. If the police ever connected him to Olivia and searched his house, the gun would be a point of suspicion. In his panicked state, he'd brought it with him, tucked into the waistband of his pants. He hadn't needed it, but now he had to get rid of it. Driving away from the scene, he took a detour, heading towards a dense patch of woods that bordered a nature preserve. He pulled over, walked 100 yards into the thick underbrush, and threw the gun as far as he could. It disappeared into the darkness with a soft thud. He didn't wrap it, didn't wipe it down. A mistake born of haste. Finally, he drove to the garden center, a 10-minute trip that felt like a lifetime. He bought a bag of fertilizer and a bottle of industrial-grade stone cleaner, items that would corroborate his lie to Nala. He paid with cash. As he drove home, back toward his glass castle, he caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. The face that stared back was a stranger's. Eyes hollow, jaw clenched, the mask of the perfect man irrevocably shattered. He had erased the ghost of Olivia Tempo from his property. Now, he had to live with the one inside his own head. He had weaponized the world's prejudices to save himself, counting on the police to see a dead black trans woman in a rough neighborhood and jump to all the wrong conclusions. He was betting his life on their bias. The call came in at 5:47 a.m., dragging Detective Zara Nyong from a restless sleep. The pre-dawn air in Stamford was damp and cold as she navigated her unmarked sedan through the city's waking streets. She'd transferred from the NYPD's 32nd Precinct in Harlem 6 months ago, trading the relentless grit of the city for what she thought would be the more civilized crimes of affluent Fairfield County. She had quickly learned that depravity wore more expensive suits here, but it was just as ugly. The crime scene was exactly what the dispatcher had described, a forgotten industrial zone that smelled of rust and decay. The flashing lights of the patrol cars painted the grimy brick walls in strobing blues and reds. Zara ducked under the yellow tape, her eyes already scanning, absorbing every detail. She was a woman who moved with a quiet, deliberate intensity. At 35, she had a reputation for being meticulous, sharp, and immune to the lazy assumptions that often plagued police work. Her new partner, a veteran detective named Mike Rourke, was already on scene, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Rourke was a classic old guard cop, 50-something, white, with a gut that strained against his wrinkled shirt and a worldview to match. "Morning, Zara," he grunted. "Don't waste too much time on this one. It's got all the hallmarks." "Hallmarks of what, Mike?" she asked, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. "Come on," he said, gesturing with his cup toward the victim's car. "Transgender woman found dumped in this part of town. It's either a John who got violent or a drug deal gone south. We'll pull her record. I guarantee you it's not clean. It's a tragedy, sure, but it's not a whodunit. It's a statistic." Zara ignored him, her focus entirely on the scene. She approached the silver Toyota. The victim, Olivia Tempo, was slumped in the driver's seat. The medical examiner was still conducting his initial assessment. Zara observed the details Rourke had so easily dismissed. The car, though in a secluded spot, was parked neatly, parallel to the curb, not the frantic haphazard stop of a violent encounter. She looked inside. The victim's purse was on the passenger seat, its contents partially spilled, but a wallet was visible, a few $20 bills peeking out. "A robbery where they don't take the cash," she murmured to herself. "Maybe they got spooked," Rourke offered from behind her. "Maybe," Zara said, though she didn't believe it. She walked around the car. The tires were clean, showing little of the gravel and dirt of the surrounding area. It suggested the car was driven here calmly, not in a panic. This wasn't the chaotic aftermath of street violence. This was staged. It was designed to look like street violence. It was an insult to her intelligence. Back at the precinct, Rourke's prediction seemed to come true, at least on the surface. Olivia Tempo had a minor record from her youth in another state: shoplifting, a disorderly conduct charge during a protest. Nothing violent, nothing recent, but to Rourke and the precinct captain, it was enough. It fit their narrative. "Look, Nyong," Captain Davies said, leaning back in his chair. "Do your due diligence, but let's be realistic. The resources for a case like this, they're not infinite. This probably won't be solved by a fingerprint on a champagne flute at a gala. This is street-level stuff. It's likely the killer is already in the system, or will be soon for something else." Zara felt a familiar burn of frustration. She had seen this 100 times in New York. A victim from a marginalized community, black, queer, trans, was automatically treated with less urgency, their case shuffled to the bottom of the pile, their life story reduced to a prejudiced assumption. They were seen as architects of their own demise. "With all due respect, Captain," Zara said, her voice even but firm, "the scene feels wrong. It's too neat. The wallet, the parking job, it feels personal, not random. I think we're being led." Davies sighed, a man burdened by budgets and political pressures. "Okay, fine. You've got 48 hours to find a promising lead, something solid. Otherwise, we treat it as a robbery homicide and move on." It wasn't a green light, it was a leash. But it was all she needed. Zara retreated to her desk, ignoring the dismissive glances from the other detectives. She pulled up everything she could on Olivia Tempo. She wasn't a statistic. She was a person. She was a journalist for the Stamford Times. She was an activist. She read through Olivia's recent articles, powerful, empathetic pieces on the transgender experience, interviews with local artists. Then she found it. A file on her work computer labeled Northgate. She opened it. It was a treasure trove of investigative research, property records, financial statements, interview notes about a company called Northgate Holdings and their controversial development project. And then she saw the name that made her sit up straight. The file contained an audio recording of an interview Olivia had conducted 6 months prior for a different story, a puff piece. The interviewee was Derek Valentine, the CEO of Valentine Consulting, one of the most powerful and respected men in Connecticut. The interview was standard fare, but Olivia's personal notes in the file were not. One entry stood out, dated just a week before her death. "DV is the key. His firm manages Northgate's offshore accounts. He knows where the bodies are buried. Does he know that I know? Must be careful. He's terrified of anything tarnishing his perfect image." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. Rourke and Davies saw a dead trans woman in a bad neighborhood. Zara was beginning to see a respected journalist on the verge of breaking a massive story, a story that led directly to the glass castle of one of the state's most untouchable men. The 48-hour clock was ticking, but Zara Nyong had her lead. She wasn't just investigating a murder anymore. She was challenging an empire. 48 hours. It was a ridiculously short time frame to unravel a life, let alone a murder. But Zara Nyong thrived under pressure. She turned her desk into a command center, the walls slowly disappearing behind a mosaic of maps, timelines, and printouts about Olivia Tempo's life. She started with the victim's apartment. It was just as it had been described in the initial report, a vibrant, intellectual space that felt more like a home than a crime scene. While the forensics team had already swept for physical evidence, Zara was looking for the ghost of Olivia's life. She found it in a worn, leather-bound journal tucked under the mattress. The entries were a raw, unfiltered chronicle of hope, love, and growing desperation, and they were all about a man referred to only as D. October 12th. D was here tonight. In this space, with me, he's real. He sheds the skin of the Greenwich god and just is. I live for these hours. But when he leaves, the silence is deafening. Am I a fool to believe his promises? November 5th. The fight was bad. I told him I can't live in the shadows anymore. He spoke of his children, his reputation. He doesn't understand. My entire existence has been a fight for visibility. He's asking me to go backward, to become invisible again. I can't. The final entry, dated the day before her murder, was chilling. He canceled. A family emergency. After my ultimatum, I know what this is. It's his answer. He's a coward. But he doesn't know what I have on Northgate. He doesn't know that the secrets are all about to come out anyway. One way or another, everything changes tomorrow. This was the motive. It was a volatile cocktail of a secret love affair and high-stakes corporate blackmail. Dee was almost certainly Derek Valentine, but she needed more than a journal entry. She needed a direct, undeniable link. The next piece came from the tech unit. They had managed to recover data from Olivia's dead phone, and on it, they found months of text messages not from Derek's official number, but from a burner phone. The texts were intimate, filled with secret meeting places, shared dreams, and escalating tension. Zara cross-referenced the cell tower data for the burner phone's number. The results were a digital map that drew a direct line to Derek Valentine. The burner phone consistently pinged off towers near Valentine Consulting's headquarters during the day. At night, it pinged off towers near Derek's Bell Haven estate, and on multiple occasions, it pinged off the same tower as Olivia's phone near her Stamford apartment. "We've got him," Detective Harris, a young, tech-savvy officer assisting her, said with excitement. "We've got a connection," Zara corrected, her voice calm. "It's a strong one, but his lawyer will call it circumstantial. We need more." She decided it was time to rattle the cage, but not the main one. Attacking a man like Derek Valentine head-on without an airtight case was professional suicide. He would lawyer up, and his PR team would paint her as a rogue cop with a vendetta. So she aimed for the next best thing, his right-hand man, Marcus Ebenezer. The COO's name had appeared in Derek's calendar for a meeting at a whiskey bar 2 nights before the murder. Zara found Marcus in his office, a space as polished and impeccably organized as Derek's. He was cool and controlled, offering condolences for Olivia's death with a practiced corporate sympathy. He denied knowing anything about Derek's personal life. "Derek and I are business partners, Detective," Marcus said smoothly. "We don't discuss our private lives in that kind of detail." Zara leaned forward, placing a printed copy of one of the burner phone texts on his desk. It read, "Marcus thinks I'm crazy to risk it all, but he doesn't understand what you are to me." She watched as a flicker of panic crossed Marcus's face before he quickly suppressed it. "I have no idea what that is," he said, but the lie was paper thin. Zara didn't push. She just let the silence hang in the air. Olivia Tempo was on the verge of exposing a massive corruption scandal involving Northgate Holdings, one of your firm's biggest clients, she said, changing tactics. "She was also in love with your best friend, and now she's dead. You're a smart man, Mr. Ebenezer. You must see how that looks." She could see the gears turning in his head, loyalty versus self-preservation. "Your friend is in a world of trouble," Zara continued, her voice low and even. "And anyone standing too close to him when this breaks is going to get buried in the rubble. I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm here to find justice for a woman who was murdered because she knew too much and loved the wrong man." She stood up, leaving her card on his desk. "When you decide that your loyalty to the truth is more important than your loyalty to a lie, you call me." As she walked out, she knew she had planted a seed of doubt. Marcus was the weak link. Now, all she could do was wait for him to break. She went back to the precinct, her 48-hour deadline ticking away. She had a powerful suspect, a clear motive, and a digital trail that led right to his door. But she was still missing the 2 things she needed most: a murder weapon and a confession. The clock was ticking. The call came 24 hours later, just as Zara's deadline was breathing down her neck. The caller ID was blocked, but she knew who it was. The voice on the other end was strained, stripped of its earlier corporate confidence. "My office, in an hour. Come alone," Marcus Ebenezer said, then hung up. Zara arrived to find Marcus looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. The blinds in his office were drawn, and a half-empty bottle of Macallan 18 stood on his desk. The facade of the cool, collected COO was gone, replaced by a raw, nerve-jangled anxiety. "This conversation is off the record until I say otherwise," he began, his voice raspy. "I need to know what happens to me, to the firm. You tell me the truth, the whole truth, and you cooperate fully, and I will make sure the DA knows you came forward on your own," Zara said, her tone professional but unyielding. You continue to obstruct this investigation, and I will charge you as an accessory after the fact. Your call, Mr. Ebenezer." Marcus stared into his glass, then finally looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "His name is Derek, not D," he began, and the dam broke. He told her everything. He spoke of Derek's initial infatuation with Olivia, how it deepened into a genuine, desperate love. He described Derek's constant state of torment, trapped between the authentic life Olivia offered and the perfect one he had built with Nayla. He confirmed Derek's terror, not just of the social fallout, but of the specific racist undertones it would carry in their world. He kept saying, "They'll feed me to the wolves, Marcus," Ebenezer recounted, his voice trembling slightly. He was obsessed with how the Greenwich elite, his white clients, would see it. He believed they would use it as an excuse to tear down everything he'd built, to prove he was never really one of them. He detailed their last meeting at the whiskey bar. He was coming apart at the seams, Marcus said. Olivia had given him an ultimatum, and she was about to publish the Northgate story. He felt like the walls were closing in from every direction. He was talking about running away, about just disappearing. He was terrified. Was he violent? Did he ever talk about hurting her? Zara asked, her pen flying across her notepad. Marcus shook his head vehemently. "No, never. That's the part I can't wrap my head around. Derek isn't a violent man. He's a strategist, a thinker. He solves problems with his mind, not his fists. Sometimes, when people are trapped, they don't think. They just react," Zara said softly. She looked at Marcus, seeing not just an informant, but a man grieving the loss of the friend he thought he knew. "What happened on the day she died? Did you speak to him?" "He called me late that night," Marcus admitted, the words coming out in a pained whisper. He sounded hollow, empty. He said there had been a family emergency and that he'd be unreachable for a day or so. He said he needed to handle the situation with Olivia. I asked him what that meant. He just said, "It's over. I made a choice." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. It was the confirmation Zara needed. It placed Derek's emotional state at a breaking point and provided a clear motive. The district attorney would now have enough to get a search warrant for Derek Valentine's home and office. As Zara prepared to leave, Marcus stopped her. "Detective," he said, his face etched with a deep personal pain. "When you talk to him, he's not a monster. He's a man who got so good at building cages for himself and others that he forgot how to live outside of one. He was terrified of the truth, and now he's been consumed by the lie." Zara nodded, a flicker of empathy breaking through her professional demeanor. "The lie has a price, Mr. Ebenezer, and right now, it looks like Olivia Tempo paid for it with her life. Now your friend is going to have to pay his share." She left Marcus alone with his whiskey and his conscience. The betrayal of his friendship had given her the key she needed, but she knew that Derek Valentine's glass castle was built with reinforced walls. To bring it down, she would need more than a motive and a witness's shaky testimony. She would need something tangible, something undeniable. She needed the murder weapon, and she had a sinking feeling it wouldn't be found sitting in a desk drawer. The search warrant was a declaration of war. When Zara and her team, including a forensics unit, arrived at Derek Valentine's Bellhaven estate, it was a quiet, clinical invasion. Derek was the picture of concerned cooperation, his face a mask of dignified confusion. Nala, looking pale and shaken, ushered the children out of the house to a waiting relative, shielding them from the intrusion. "I don't understand, Detective," Derek said, his voice smooth as silk. "I've told you I barely knew Ms. Tempo. This feels like an incredible overreach." "Just covering all our bases, Mr. Valentine," Zara replied, her eyes scanning the impossibly clean and orderly home. The house was a dead end. Forensics found nothing. No stray hairs, no misplaced fibers, nothing to connect Olivia to the pristine interior. Derek's work office was equally sterile. His lawyers were already making calls, accusing the Stamford PD of harassment. The pressure on Zara from her captain was immense. The case was turning into a political minefield, and she had nothing but circumstantial evidence. Her focus turned to the garden. It was a sprawling, multi-level landscape of perfect lawns and artistic stonework. It was a massive area to search. As the forensics team began their slow, methodical grid search, Zara walked the grounds, trying to see it through Olivia's eyes. She imagined the confrontation, the rising tension. She stood by the stone wall Olivia must have hopped. Her eyes landed on the abstract stone sculpture on the lower terrace. It was jagged, brutal, a perfect accidental weapon. "Focus on this area," she commanded the forensics team. "Check the sculpture, the flagstones, the soil around it. Use luminol. If there was blood here, he would have had to use a lot of water to clean it." An hour later, a young technician called her over. Under the harsh glare of a portable UV light, faint, ghostly blue patterns began to glow on the stone patio and at the base of the sculpture. "It's been scrubbed, and scrubbed well," the technician said. "But luminol finds what the eye can't. We've got blood traces. We'll need to run DNA, but this is a very good sign." It was a breakthrough, but still not enough. A good lawyer could argue the blood was from anything: a cut finger, a bloody nose. She needed the weapon that had caused the fatal injury. But Olivia hadn't been shot. The ME's report had confirmed cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. So, where was the weapon? The sculpture was the weapon. This proved the location, but not the killer. She was still missing a direct link. Then she remembered Marcus's testimony. Derek had a gun. What if her initial theory was wrong? What if the blunt force trauma was a secondary injury? Zara's mind flashed back to the crime scene, the neatly parked car, the staged robbery. Derek was a planner, a strategist. He wouldn't have used a gun registered to him. It was too direct, too traceable. But what if he'd brought it, panicked, and then realized he had to get rid of it? She pulled up the cell tower data again, tracking Derek's burner phone on the night of the murder. After leaving the vicinity of his house, there was a strange detour, a 10-minute stop on a quiet road bordering the Mianus River Gorge Preserve, a vast expanse of dense forest. It was miles from the garden center he claimed to have visited. He dumped something, she said to herself. Getting authorization for a search of that scale was a nightmare. "You want me to authorize a multi-day search of a 900-acre forest for a gun you're not even sure is the murder weapon, based on a cell phone ping?" Captain Davies had fumed. "It's a waste of resources." Zara stood her ground. "He's a meticulous planner, Captain. He wouldn't leave a gun in his house. This is our best, maybe our only, shot at finding a direct piece of physical evidence." Reluctantly, Davies agreed, but he only authorized a small team and one K-9 unit. The dog was a magnificent German shepherd named Blue, a legend in the department for his tracking abilities. For 2 days, the team scoured the dense woods. The terrain was difficult, a thick tangle of underbrush and fallen leaves. Hope began to fade. On the afternoon of the third day, Zara was about to call it off. Suddenly, Blue, who had been casting back and forth, froze. His ears perked up, and he let out a series of sharp, excited barks, his tail rigid. He began digging frantically at the base of a large oak tree, under a pile of damp leaves. His handler rushed over. "He's got something!" They dug with their hands, pulling away the wet earth and decaying foliage. And then they saw it. Wrapped in what looked like an oil-stained rag was a gun. It was a .45 caliber handgun, heavy, black, and cold. Zara felt a surge of triumph that was both exhilarating and grim. They had it. They had the final piece. As the forensics team carefully bagged the weapon, she looked at Blue, who was now sitting patiently, accepting a reward from his handler. He was just a dog doing his job, but in that moment, he was the fang of justice, unearthing a secret that a powerful man had tried to bury in the dark. The glass castle was about to come tumbling down. The final interrogation was not in the cold, sterile room at the precinct. At Zara's insistence, it was in the conference room of Valentine Consulting, Derek's seat of power, the heart of his empire. She wanted to strip him of his fortress on his own territory. Derek sat at the head of the long, polished table, his lawyer by his side. He looked tired, but still projected an aura of untouchable confidence. He had an answer for everything. The blood in the garden. "My son cut his knee quite badly a few weeks ago, a nasty fall." The burner phone. "A private line for sensitive client communications, standard practice." The late-night drive. "I was stressed. I went for a drive to clear my head." Zara listened patiently, letting him build his web of lies. Then she placed a clear evidence bag on the table. Inside was the .45 caliber handgun, cleaned and tagged. "We found this in the Mianus River Gorge Preserve, Mr. Valentine," she said. her voice quiet but carrying the weight of certainty. Right where your burner phone pinged for 10 minutes on the night Olivia Tempo was killed. Forensics found your fingerprints all over it. It's registered to you. Derek's composure finally cracked. A muscle in his jaw twitched. His lawyer began to speak, but Zara held up a hand. Before you say anything, she continued, her gaze locked on Derek, I should tell you we also have a sworn statement from Marcus Ebenezer. He told us everything, Derek, about your relationship with Olivia, about her ultimatum, about your phone call to him that night, when you said you handled it and made a choice. She let the words sink in. She saw the calculation in his eyes turn to despair. The strategist had run out of moves. His perfect world, held together by secrets and lies, was disintegrating before his eyes. He stared at the gun, then at Zara. The silence in the room was absolute. When he finally spoke, his voice was a broken whisper. I loved her, he said, the words seeming to be pulled from the depths of his soul. God, I really did. And then he confessed, not in a torrent, but in a slow, painful trickle of truth. He spoke of his panic when he saw Tyrone on the steps, the instinctive, thoughtless push. I didn't mean to... the sculpture. I just wanted her to be quiet, to disappear for a second so I could think. He described the horrifying moment of realization, the cold, reptilian logic that took over as he planned the cover-up. He detailed how he staged the scene in Stamford, how he scrubbed the blood from his garden, how he threw the gun into the woods. I thought I could build a wall around that moment, he said, tears now streaming down his face. I thought I could seal it off and keep living. But it's all I see when I close my eyes. Her face. The surprise in her eyes. He finally looked at Zara, his expression one of utter defeat. I spent my whole life trying to be perfect. The perfect student, the perfect businessman, the perfect husband, the perfect black man for a white world. One mistake, and they'd tear me down. I was so afraid of them destroying my life that I destroyed it myself, and I took hers with me. A week after Derek Valentine's arrest on charges of second-degree murder, Zara met Nala Valentine at a quiet coffee shop, far from the glare of the media. Nala looked fragile but carried herself with a profound, sorrowful dignity. He told me everything, Nala said, her voice barely audible over the clink of cups. About Olivia, about her being, about who she was. He said he loved her, and the most painful part, detective, is that I believe him. She looked up, her eyes holding a universe of pain. He was so afraid of what the world would think of him, of them, that he became a monster to protect an illusion. Our perfect life was a lie he was willing to kill for. Zara had no easy words of comfort. There were none. You have to be strong for your children now, was all she could offer. I will be, Nala said, squaring her shoulders. And I will teach them that the only perfect life is an honest one. It's a lesson their father learned far too late. She stood, thanked Zara, and walked out of the cafe, a woman ready to face the ruins of her life and build something new and true from the rubble. Later that evening, Zara stood at her own apartment window, looking out at the city lights. The case was closed, justice was on its course, but there was no sense of triumph. It was a tragedy, born from a web of fear, fear of societal judgment, fear of losing status, fear of not living up to an impossible ideal. Derek Valentine had been so consumed with being a symbol that he had lost his humanity. The ultimate lesson of The Greenwich Secret was brutally simple. Olivia Tempo had engraved it on a keychain. Being yourself is the ultimate courage. It was a courage she had lived by every day of her difficult, beautiful life. And it was a courage Derek Valentine, for all his power and success, could not find until it was too late, leaving behind a legacy not of perfection, but of devastation. The real cage was never the one others built for you. It was the one you built for yourself.